first I'd like to thank you guys for having me. My name is Mona Franklin. I am the Haskell Human Resource Specialist here at Haskell, and I'm also a Haskell alumni. So I've been here, I'm Lakota from South Dakota. I've been here at Haskell, I'm going on 18 years, and 11 of my years have been in human resources. So I've been here for a little bit. Time flies when you're having fun. I received my associates in business in 2001, and then I went on for the School of Business, and I received that in 2006. I was the last graduating class for the Computer Information Systems degree. And then I decided to go on a little bit further, and I received my master's degree from Baker University in Management in 2014. And so I've just been working since then. So my office is usually staffed with 2 employees. I do have a vacant position right now that I'm having a hard time recruiting for, unfortunately. And so some of you guys might see me here. I also do talks with, Michelle, you want to hand these up? I also do talks with the human resource class periodically throughout. Because we do have a large number of our students that come back and work for us, whether it's student work study program or you come back and you're interested in applying. I put this position up. This is actually a job that I released just today, so I will use it as a guide. But this is always my first go-to form. So we abide by this law for Indian preference, and what that means is if you have a tribal enrollment card, when we advertise jobs, we give preference to Native Americans first. It's the same thing as vet preference if we have any vets. So one of the biggest mistakes that students make is they don't get this form. You have to send this to your BIA office, and they have to fill it out. A lot of times what students do is they'll scan their tribal enrollment cards, and then I'll automatically deem you ineligible because it has to be this. So I really try to get to students and get you guys to get this filled out early on in your career, because hopefully you guys will begin working in fields that make sense to the degree that you're going into or something that you want to do. But if you apply for any jobs under Indian preference, you have to have this. They will not take your tribal enrollment cards. So these are located, if you lose this one, they're located outside the Human Resource Office, which is in Navarre. And spread the word if anybody, and I'll leave extra copies here too. So this is the biggest thing. So I just want to go over some pointers of applying for jobs, because there is a big difference in applying for a federal position as opposed to a private sector. And a long-winded way to say it, or short-winded way to say it, is we're federal. And so I know when you start doing mock interviews for private sector, they might tell you 1 to 2 pages. Total opposite with government. You can give me a 6-page resume. I want to see everything that you did. And typically I want to see it in detail, because in the government, if you haven't held the position, and I use this one as I was talking with Yosh, this one is a prime example, because the staff here are retention specialists. Well, in the government, they're not federal positions, but this one is. So in the government, they would automatically qualify. There's no education for this one. So they would automatically qualify, one, because they hold the position. They are already retention specialists, which a specialist is higher than a technician. And so in applying for these jobs, some of the stuff that you're going to want to pay attention to is this one right here. I mean, if you're really honestly looking just to apply for agencies that recognize, which is BIE, Bureau of Indian Education, and BIA, which is Bureau of Indian Affairs, they're always going to have Indian preference. And the only thing that trumps a vet is an Indian. So when you do your search, you want to select that. And that's only going to bring forward the jobs that Native Americans can apply. We have a lot of people that aren't Native American that apply to it. But once there's an answer that says, are you applying under Indian preference, yes or no? If you click no, it's automatically going to weed you out. It'll let you finish the application, but it's going to weed you out behind the scenes, and I'll get a code that says this person is non-native, and so those ones just kind of go to the side. So here's a position that I put out for the Student Success Center today. So one of the biggest things that I see with students, and I'll be the first to admit I made the same mistake. When I was a student here, I worked for the admissions office, and I was very comfortable in my job. I loved my job. I loved my boss. I stayed there the whole 4 years that I was here. So I knew as a business student, I knew that I either wanted to do HR or I wanted to do IT. Problem is, I didn't go work in those places, so by the time I graduated and I wanted to qualify for a help desk job in IT, nobody would take me because I didn't have any experience. What you guys will find is when you graduate with your bachelor's degree, and I don't say this to be discouraging, but a bachelor's degree is almost the norm now. If you start looking at positions, and the only reason why this position requires no education, and it'll tell you, because it falls under a clerk position. So had anything else, you go down here and you'll see that education is blank. It doesn't require any education. But when you get into like the 7, 9, 11s, those require anything from a master's is the minimum all the way up to a PhD. So the big thing is when you're applying for these entry jobs like this is you have to have this. You have to have the work experience because the education, one, might not be a requirement for the position, and two, this is the biggest thing right here because if it is a position that it's called a positive education, it's a requirement. So it's not like, hey, I have a bachelor's degree. It's a basic requirement of the job. So once you get past the basic requirement, and then we're going to start looking for this. We're going to actually see if you held the title of a retention technician or retention specialist, or if you've done any kind of work in the field that could support any of this. And so when I talk to students, I always tell them, I have a lot of students that work at casinos. And so I use the example of custodial staff. I've had a lot of people from the Prairie Band Potawatomi apply for custodial, and I'm getting ready to put out another position that's going to recruit 4 custodial staff. And they never qualify because they list all their duties on here in bullet points on their resume like this, but they'll say slot machine, deliver pop, coins, they replenish the coins, walk around, make sure that, none of that applies to what I'm looking for. When I'm looking for a custodial, and we have a casino on our reservation, so I know my little sister works in the casino. I know she wipes down the machines, whether it's for germs or somebody spilled pop. I know she empties the trash can. Those are things that you actually want to do. You want to look at what I'm asking for in the position here, and you want to take, and that's not to say that people that work in casinos wouldn't qualify. You just have to pull your duties out of your job and word them to where I'm looking for them. So tell me you wipe down the machines, tell me you wipe down the chairs, tell me you empty the trash, tell me you wipe down the counters, whether it's food services. You can take any job and really turn it into the job that you're looking for, given they lapse. So this is the biggest thing. So back to, you guys are students, I would really consider working in fields that you're interested in. I try not to discourage people from working at food services because I know college students, they need the money, it's a job. But if you're not going into that career field, then don't do your whole 4 years over there. If you're in business, you're gonna have to find some offices that you're working in business. If you wanna do academic career services such as Trio, you gotta get your foot in the door and get some experience. And also keep in mind with students, and I explained this, I have a brand new student worker, and so I was telling her, you're gonna have to work here for 2 years for me to give you credit for 1 year. Because you guys are students, you work 20 hours a week. So if you worked 1 full week and then you came and applied for one of my jobs, I'm gonna cut that whole year in half because you only work 20 hours a week, not 40 hours a week. 40 hours a week for 1 year, I can give you credit for 1 year. But if it's a student worker employment, you work a whole year, I'm only gonna give you credit for 6 months. So, and those are the regs that we have to follow. So I would not wait until your junior year to try to start getting some of that experience in. How many of you guys do student work study here at Haskell? None? Something to consider. I will tell you, we do the background investigations. I work with Carlene Morris, who's a financial aid director. So once you apply for her over there, even if it's volunteer work, you guys, there's a lot of scholarships out there, but there's also a lot of jobs now that require volunteer work. And it's not a requirement, but it's a huge perk. It's a huge perk to have. So even if you don't work to get paid, you can still consider volunteering in that area, so that way you have it on your resume. And somebody's willing to vouch for you, the director or somebody's willing to vouch and say, this person did 2 years of volunteer service. And they can give you credit for that. So that's something to consider. So Carlene Morris in the financial aid office does the student employment. Once it gets approved, then it actually comes to me and I'll begin working with you on the background investigation. And that too is a huge perk to have on your resume. Because if you do leave here and want federal or tribal employment, that's really huge because a lot of people do background, state, military. Ours is pretty high because it's federal. So something to consider. So make sure and set your bucket list that falls in line. I always say your freshman and sophomore year, because remember you got to work 2 years to get credit for one as a student. So the sooner the better. Some of this stuff, I did talk about resumes. I am willing to look. I brought some business cards. If anybody wants to sit down, all that I ask is you send me an email and I will designate a time. I'll be more than happy to sit down with you and go over your resumes if you're interested in applying for jobs or you're getting close to graduation. I will sit down with you and look at your resume, even now if you're freshmen, and say, hey, if this is the field of study you're going in, these are the offices that are looking for employment, or these are the offices you should try to get employment with. So I'm always willing to sit down with people and look at their resumes. So just pay attention to when you do your mock interviews with FedEx or whoever. Private sector's resumes are totally separate. They probably do want that one or two. They're probably not interested in references. Because we do the federal background investigations, with us you have to have 6 references. You have to have 3 personal, and those 3 personal references have to cover your last 5 years of employment. And then you have 3 personal references, and those are people that don't overlap with the professional. It's just people that know you and know your character. So totally different resumes. So I always tell everybody when you do your resumes, whether it's private sector or government, you always want to save your resume as whatever the job title you're applying for. But don't upload. I have a lot of people that send me resumes that are not even for the job that I'm looking for. They just forgot to change the title on the resume. So they'll have slot machine, and it's like, I'm not looking for a slot machine resume, but they just forget to change the title. That's no biggie, but might be for the hiring official because it doesn't look like you put very much detail into it. Things that need to be listed on the resume for federal is your title that you held, your salary, duration of employment, and who your supervisor was. So when people apply for federal jobs, and I clearly put that on down here, what we're looking for on the resume, I really tell people you have to read what we're looking for. So right here. Because if any of this is missing, and this is the big one, is your dates of employment. So if somebody listed that they were a retention technician for, let's say, another college, but they didn't list any dates, that person then goes ineligible, because I don't have, I could have 150 people apply, and I don't have time to call everybody that forgot to list their dates to say, hey, I need to give you a year's worth of credit, but what if they only worked a month? What if they only worked 30 days? So if you forget any of these, it automatically weeds you out. And I'll just put a code on there that says you didn't provide enough information and we deemed you ineligible. So when you look at job announcements, you want to see specifically what they're looking for. We talked about the Indian preference, volunteer, backgrounds.
What about the Indian preference? I thought it started at 12.
The Indian preference, Did you get one of the forms?
No.
So this is the form, and you want to have it filled out before you start applying for jobs. Because a lot of people upload their actual tribal enrollment cards and will automatically deem you ineligible. It has to be that form. It doesn't automatically start as a 12, it just gives you preference to apply as Indian preference. So as I was saying, when we put a job out such as this, I guarantee you we'll get 150 people applying for this. But there's going to be a question when you apply. It says, are you claiming Indian preference, yes or no? If you answer no, it's going to put you over there in that batch of ineligible people. So when the job closes and I'm ready to rate them, I'm going to pull a report. I only want to see those that said yes. And then even those that said yes, if you didn't scan in that form and it was filled out by your tribe, you're going to go in that batch as well. We sometimes have people fill the form out themselves and it's obvious. I'll pick up the phone and call that tribe and say, hey, did Jane, do you have this person? People really fill those forms out themselves and upload them. So if it looks fishy, then I'm going to question it and I'll pick up the phone and call whatever tribe you listed to verify. So one of my things is just make sure you read through. This is really important. Make sure you read through, and even salary. So like this one, this is a GS7, and the job will actually tell you. So these are conditions of employment, and this is probably the biggest question I get on this one. It's listed as seasonal. So what that means, if you see anything that says seasonal, is it's a condition of employment. So you can't take the job and then try to negotiate that with me. It's a requirement of the position. And so the confirmation letter that you sign with me, you're acknowledging that this is a condition of employment. So we will place you into non-pay status for 2 weeks. And so non-pay status means you're not going to get paid for 2 weeks out of every year. Now that could go all the way up to 12 weeks, but it could just be 2. The minimum is 2 weeks. So back up here, and the reason why they do salary on these is because every job will list the starting salary, which this is a GS7, so there's a pay scale out there. So if you don't, this doesn't require an education. So let's say you were a retention tech or a retention specialist. If you don't have, so let's say you're a retention tech at another college, but you were only making $30,000. I would still be able to qualify you. One, because you had the title and you didn't make the money, but let's say if you didn't have the retention tech title, but you were making a job at another college, let's say a recruitment technician, but you made that salary. I could probably meet you halfway and say, oh, this person does do some form of recruiting, which the job requires, does work retention, helps students, up their retention. Whatever those requirements are, that's why you want to list your salary. And then there's a such thing as being overqualified as well. So if I don't find any of the responsibilities of the stuff that we're looking for there, or the specialized experience, then you're probably going to be deemed not qualified. So it's really important to list your salary. I mean, sometimes it even works backwards. We have people making $100,000 that want to apply for our $35,000 jobs. They would obviously still be qualified because they made double the salary, but I have deemed a lot of people making $100,000 as ineligible because they didn't list any of this. They listed, was chairman for the tribe for 3 years. That's a great position and great salary. But if your resume had 2 bullets and said you were chairman and you did budget, you're going to get deemed unqualified because nothing, you didn't put anything that I'm looking for in there. So another thing, and this is probably just my pet peeve as an HR person, is when you do your resumes. I know you guys are young adults, but you got to take, there's a big difference between professional and silly. And when you start applying for jobs, you got to take those silly emails off. We get a lot of emails that says sugar daddy 69, and when you submit paperwork, it's just awkward to, when you're applying for actually a career in an academic setting, to have, because some of them are borderline. We literally contacted people before and told them, look, either provide me a new email address, we can't use this, because some of it's foul language, and you don't ever want to do that for a job. So if you're applying for a job, you probably want to put a pretty fair, safe email on there. So here's another catch on applying for jobs. So this one is tied to the salary. So we're looking for a GS7, which starts out at the $41,000. So this is probably the biggest thing, if not the Indian preference, that will weed you out. You have to have one experience at the lower level position. So the GS6 is, you have to be in that for 1 year. 1 year. So when I say a GS6, if you haven't held a government position that actually is a GS6, then we're going to go back and look whether or not you have this and whether or not you have the salary of a GS6. So those are just things that you have to pay attention to when you're applying for jobs. So, and the last thing I have is make sure if it is, this one is not, but if it's asking for education requirements, which we call a positive education, and it asks for transcripts, you have to upload your transcripts. And what I'm looking for is a conferred date there. If you're claiming you have a degree, the degree date has to be listed there. Otherwise, I won't be able to give you credit, even though I can see all those credits and all those grades. If a degree is not conferred, then I can't accept it. And another mistake students make is they'll submit copies of the diploma or certificates. With technology that we have, the systems are getting smarter, and so they're only letting you upload before, you know, we have professors and they have CVs instead of resumes, and sometimes those are 30 pages long. So the system does not let you upload that. I mean, you can probably go to 6 or 7 pages, but as far as transcripts, if you don't upload the transcripts, we had a student I just rated another position, and we had some phenomenal students that worked for us the whole career that they were here as in the dorms as residential housing students, and it required a degree. And I had to weed out 4 or 5 people because they listed copies of their bachelor degree and not their transcripts. So all 4 of those people got weeded out, and they can't be considered because it has to, if it says transcript, it has to be transcript. If it says Indian preference form, it has to be Indian preference form and not copies of your tribal enrollment card. So I always tell people just to really, really pay attention and look at the wording. What I do is when I help people apply for jobs, I'll print the job announcement and go through and highlight stuff like this. Like, you know, this is what they're looking for. You know, those duties. Where'd my duties go? You know, all of these are going to be required. I just go through and highlight absolute everything that you need, and then you start chipping away at the job. One of the things I do tell people with government is if you have a degree or you know somebody that has a degree. So for example, like this. If I had somebody apply for this that no education is required and they had the experience, and let's say they had a master's degree, the highest you're going to go is a 7. You can go on opm.gov, and if you have a master's degree, you can walk into the government at a 9 and or a 9 or 11. So if you were to apply for this, it would lock you in. So what that means is you would be locked into this position, and you'd have to climb your way up the government wall of sitting as a GS7 for 1 year, and then sitting at a GS9 for 1 year, and then sitting at a GS11 for 1 year, as opposed to probably just being patient, get your master's degree, then you walk in as a GS9-11. So if you apply for a position that's basically, you know, if you have an education higher than what that outlines, you're going to lock yourself in. So, and there's no way to get out of that unless you apply for another position at another agency as a brand new applicant. And when you're in the government, when you work for the government, a lot of, I know this is kind of confusing because it took me a while to get it, but when you start applying for jobs like this right here, whoops, it'll tell you, so it'll tell you like your eligibility, like, uh-oh, where did I go? It'll tell you your different eligibilities. Never used one of these, it's kind of fun. It'll tell you your different kind of, and everybody claims that they're a displaced employee, and then I'll have to go in there and find whether or not they're really, a displaced employee means that you went through a RIF, you know, that your agency shut down and everybody got a severance package. So everybody honestly answers yes. So when you go looking for a job, you want to use these filters. And as I was saying at the beginning, if you're looking for a job, you can already see that there's 8 jobs out there for Native Americans. But if you're not interested in applying through that, you could, what this one means is, competitive service means you have to, it's with government, this one's open to the public, this one's accepted service. So if I, which I do, I've been announcing a few jobs, meaning if I put this one out there, only Haskell employees could apply. Only our employees that work here that are federal employees would be able to apply. So we have contractors on campus, they wouldn't be eligible. It's only for ours, and part of that, doing that, is succession planning training, and or we see that our employees are eligible for promotion. So we'll promote, and then we'll recruit more new ones in the door. So these you want to pay attention to, but competitive service in the government is called career conditional. Once you're with the government, and you're with the government for 3 years, then you get this thing called career status. So I've been here 18 years, so let's say if I left Haskell, went to pursue my doctorate degree, and then came back to apply for, I would apply under competitive service, and that means I already got my 3 years in the government. So I would go on a different piece of paper. So if there were 10 people that never had government employee, I would be put on a special paper saying, this is a former government employee. So, and it's nice because it puts you on a whole special packet when the managers are hiring. So, I think that's honestly it. Go back to this one. Do you guys have any questions?
Do you have time today to look over any
Yeah.
resumes?
Yeah. Yep. And who you also list as your references is really important. Because you want to list, I tell you, because we do the background investigations, you can list anybody that you want to list on there, but if you're being considered for a position, we're only interested in looking at who you worked for. Doesn't mean that we're automatically going to go to that person. If you haven't had, I had this one gentleman and he worked at his job for 11 years, but he said on his resume, I don't want you to contact my supervisor. Well, as a hiring official, which is not me, but that kind of sends up a little bit of a red flag. But I told him when he called and he was worried about it, I said, it's, you know, it gives you the appearance of a red flag, but you don't work somewhere for 11 years, you know, and, you know, long story short, his supervisor ended up giving him a good reference. They didn't have the best of relationships, but I told him, I said, from the HR stance, it looks fine to me. You have tenure there. I mean, you've been there for 11 years. I mean, you know, we live in the world, not everybody gets along, you know, but as long as you didn't get fired, or if you did get fired, if there was a valid reason why you got fired, I mean, they're always going to give you, just because you got fired from somewhere doesn't mean you're not going to get hired either. So we will ask for the specific supervisors that you have worked for. So try to list them. If you work for them, list them. And if you leave them off, we'll call you and ask you for them. And if we can't weasel the names out of you, then we'll go on to our next candidates. So, yes.
As far as like job-wise,
Mhm.
if working for a nonprofit, still be considered as a job?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was saying that before you came in.
Oh, okay.
Even volunteer work, absolutely. Yeah.
So that would be like for experience and those all
The catch in that is you have to have somebody, whoever your go-to person is. Like if I volunteered for you for a year, I want to make sure that you're going to be there. So if I leave and apply for this job that's relevant to your volunteer work, it's not going to mean anything if you left and they came back and say, hey, did Mona volunteer with you for a year? Well, you're gone and they can't get a hold. Nobody can vouch for my volunteer work. So it's good. That's why I said your personal references. It's good not to just know one person. You know, I might know you, and I might know you, and I might know you. So if you retire, somebody can vouch that I did volunteer for this program for 2 years.
Okay.
So when you expand and start making those connections, you know, I always tell people, you know, make a lot of connections, because that way somebody's going to be able to vouch for you.
How crucial is like your background as being a criminal or something like that? If you have a record.
And that is another good point. And that's why I encourage people to do your backgrounds as a student. Don't wait till you graduate and had your degree and then you want to run your background. You know, do it as a student worker. Try to get employed somewhere here on campus while you're a student, because we will run that background on you. And ours, being in federal, is one of the highest backgrounds that you can have. We get a lot of people that say, oh, I worked for the state and they did it. Theirs is a 24-hour background. I can guarantee you ours takes 30 days, huh?
Yep.
But it's just more, it's an extensive background, and it's a huge perk to have on your resume. Whether you go back to a tribe or you go to another federal agency, it's a huge perk to have on your background. So, and don't be, if you got arrested before, you had a DUI, don't let that intimidate you. People have gone through, it depends on the serious nature of the crime. And they look at your pattern. So if you're 30 years old and you had a DUI when you were 18 and and maybe one when you were 23, they're gonna look at that gap of services. Or if you got fired, they will actually contact them to find out. And what they're really honestly looking at is your integrity. Whether or not you're telling the truth. An investigator can't, like my position, I have a higher level background, they will come out face to face and they want to interview you. And they're sitting across from you, and it's one of these things where they flash you their badge, your FBI, because it's the FBI. They'll flash you your badge, and then they'll sit there and start asking you questions. And I already knew because I did the training, I do the background. I already knew what they were doing, but they want to, you know, for example, I left a bill off. They know all of my bills. They know my pattern of how I pay my bills.
Oh, nice.
So I left, yeah. So we can pull all the way up to parking tickets.
Oh, my.
Mhm. And that's what they're looking at. They're looking at the honesty of, are you gonna be honest? You know, if they're talking to you about the background. So if you got fired and they wanna interview you, they wanna see if you're honest, because I guarantee you they already know the other side of the story. There's not two sides of the story, there's three sides to the story. So a lot of it is, and when I did mine, you know, 11 years ago, I had a medical bill on there that I forgot. He was like, is that all, are you sure that's it? And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure that's it. And he brought up a medical bill from when I had my child. And I was making payments, you know, I wasn't delinquent, I was nothing, but they look at that. They look at your, because when you become a government worker, you are obligated to pay your debt, whether it's student loans, medical bills, credit card bills, you cannot be delinquent. And a lot of people think, so when I do orientation, I even talk about if you file bankruptcy as a student, I'll talk to you about social media, I'll talk to you about if you file bankruptcy, come see me. I'd prefer you come see me before you file bankruptcy because we offer services that could help you. But if you file bankruptcy, everybody's always like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. It's not a bad thing. The government looks at it like you have a huge debt and this is a step you're taking to make it better. Filing bankruptcy is not a bad thing. It's a step towards making things right. But people automatically assume, oh, I'm not going to pass, it's horrible. That's not the case. And a lot of it's tied to your integrity, whether or not you're going to be truthful and tell the truth. And then they'll look at those patterns. Now, I will tell you, one of the ones that is hard to get through is domestic violence. I'm not saying if you've had one, don't try. Try. What's the worst case scenario? They're going to tell you no. But like I said, if there's a pattern of it, then they might come back and say no. You know, depending on the field that you work in. Haskell's backgrounds are pretty significant because we work with students. Regardless of your age, we might have a student that's 17 years old. Well, we all know that's a minor. And so that's why our backgrounds are a higher level than the rest of federal agencies, because we have our daycare and we do have students that are under 18 years old. So they're considered minor. They're not adults yet. And so that's why the backgrounds are like they are. So, any other questions? I do have cards. I will leave a little stack of my cards here if anybody's interested. I can go over yours with you.
Okay, it's on a flash drive.
I don't have a computer. I don't know.
There's some right there.
Okay. More than happy to, like I said, if you guys want to email me and we can sit down and go over resumes. If you're looking for jobs, I do try to go to the graduation rehearsals to pick up our students every summer to try to employ. But like I said, hopefully you guys don't wait until you graduate to try to get into the field that you're interested in doing. Do it beforehand, run the background beforehand. Even if you find an office that maybe you can't work 20 hours a week, but maybe you can work 10. Something is better than nothing. So, no more questions?
Where's your
Thank you.
office located?
I am located in Navarre Hall, room 110.